This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
All right, we are back here with Dr. Lisa Johnson, who's in private practice as a family therapist and is here to talk more today about her memoir that she has titled My Relationship with Oprah, My Own Super Soul Evolution to Restorative Justice. Welcome back to the show. How are you today?
Thanks. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, pleasure to see you again. I know you're based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, right? And for those that may not know, just give us a little
Yes.
background as to who you are, what you do, and then we'll dive into all specifics for today, okay?
Okay. I'm a family therapist in private practice. I've been, when I was 14, I decided I wanted to be a counselor at Planned Parenthood when I grew up. And then today I'm going to talk a little bit about the event that happened in my life while I was in college studying psychology that shifted that direction a little bit. And then I after I graduated with my bachelor's degree, at one point I was on the Oprah Winfrey Show with the rest of the people in my team. And the story that I am writing in my memoirs is about how how I took the experiences that I've had in my life and used them to help other people similarly to Oprah. And how if we looked at the world through the lens of restorative justice, the situation that happened to me in 1980 might have been handled differently. Because I dedicated my life to restorative justice without really ever knowing what those words were. And over the years, kind of learned about those concepts more from the process of practicing that in my life than from outside in. It's from the inside out kind of experience. It's a very spiritual, soulful journey. So that's basically, I'm in private practice now. I've been doing that since 1990. I've been a therapist, a family therapist. I help people overcome the impact of trauma on their relationships, taking my own experience and putting it to use to help other people.
Beautiful. Well, we're excited you're back here to talk more and continue the story about your memoirs, how it all started, and what really happened back on that day, which was October 5th, 1980. Would you mind diving back and explaining this to our listeners
Sure.
and viewers? Thank you.
Sure. So while I was a freshman in college, I got a job at a local gas station and was working on a Sunday night at the gas station. And two men came into the gas station and pointed a gun at me. One of them came to the counter with a blue denim bag and said to put all the money in the bag. And the other one walked around the back of
Ah,
uh, the gas station and gathered,
yeah.
things and gathered other things to steal off the shelves. Um, as we continued, and as I started putting the money in the bag, they decided that the money wasn't enough. I pulled the silent burglar alarm in hopes that the police would come and intervene, but they told me to get in the car and took me in the car and kidnapped me, and they both sexually assaulted me. First, the one with the gun got in the back seat with me, and then they stopped at one point and switched directions, and the other one got it in the back with me, and they finally let me go. And I looked at the license plate number of the car and I repeated it out loud to myself over and over again until I knocked on the door of somebody's house that would let me in and let me call the police. So that was the event itself that happened. As the days, as the day transpired, I called the police and I looked out the window, and one of
Ah,
the, it's so interesting some of the memories you have. I
yeah.
walked into the door and there was a phone on the wall that I started heading towards, and they said, no, no, this phone doesn't work. And so they sent me to this other telephone on the table, one of those dial phones on remember, it was 1980, right? And they were watching Jaws on television. And I was thinking, here I am with blood dripping out of my head, and these
Ah,
kids are watching Jaws on television. And I'm like, this is more scary for them than than the television show. So I called the police, and as I was waiting for the police to come and meet me there at the house where they had, called, I could see my father's car going back and forth. I had called my parents first because what do you do when you're 18 years old and
Yeah.
something happens to you, right? You call your mom and dad and you say, oh my gosh, this happened to me. And so my parents went to the gas station thinking I was still there. My mom stayed at the gas station while my dad followed the police car to where I was. And the police were trying to keep me away from my dad. And I was like, I don't want to talk to you until my dad comes in. And
Ah,
they, as you imagine, different men have different attitudes about how their daughters are treated when they've been in a sexual
assaulted.
situation.
Yes.
And many men would stop police from investigating in an effort to protect me. My dad wasn't like that. He's the kind of person who wants, the he was there to protect me and make sure that the people who hurt me were the ones who were facing the consequences, not me. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So
Yeah.
my dad was right there with me. They took me back to the gas station and asked me a few questions, took me to the hospital, and they collected the evidence kit for a rape victim and sent me home. So that was, October 5th, 1980 for me. And that was, when I look back at this, this is
Ah,
one night of my life, right? This is
ah,
one night of my life. What happened after then, this story continues on and on for years. But in this context, and what I want to kind of review today more is what happened those years. So once I got back and got settled in, of course I was struggling and traumatized.
yeah.
Probably took a couple days off of work. Of course, everything's kind of a blur, but I was still a freshman in college, and I was in my first year of school. So I had English 104, which is the how to write a term paper. How do you write APA style, American Association, Psychological Association style paper. So my first paper for college was Rape Phases to Recover. I basically wrote a tech term paper on how people recover from rape.
Yeah.
And then I read it and said, okay, this is happening to me. And it gave me a map. It gave me a foundation, gave me something to expect. So I could look at what was happening and say, okay, I'm in survival mode right now. I'm in this I'm okay mode. I can't feel what's going on because I'm still trying to get grounded and oriented. And I really use the information. I remember the book. It was called The Rape Trauma Syndrome by Burgess and Holmstrom. I used college to
Yeah.
study how people heal from these things. This was my only experience of violence, my only experience of trauma. And one of the things that's really different about my experience is most people would look at a rape victim and say, what is it that she did that caused this to happen? I mean, if you look at all the different stories about, were you dressed this way? Were you in this
Ah,
place? Were you did you ask for it? Didn't you say no? All those things that people put on the victim,
yeah.
none of those were relevant for me. Work and my gas station, we're in a white turtleneck sweater. I pulled the alarm. I did all the things that you're supposed to do. I even spilled the change all over the floor, and not really in helps because I was nervous, but the change all over the floor. Oh no, I better pick it up. I, had a little delay tactic there for a minute. So my how we survive became my study. So now I'm a freshman in college studying psychology, and I use my psychology degree to study how am I healing from this. And I noticed in all the clinical psychology classes that clinical psychology is always about what's wrong with people. And I couldn't figure out, well, how are you supposed to be, right? So I took all the developmental psych courses too, to learn how do people naturally grow and develop. What is quote unquote normal, what's developmental, what's healthy development, what are the different trajectories on people go
Hmm.
through. And so then I use that to fold into my own experience. Now, how does trauma interfere in a person's development? Most of the disorders that we see are people who've had some sort of trauma that interferes in their natural growth and development. So it was a really clear putting together, here's this one experience I've had. I had pretty stable childhood, pretty stable home
Mm-hmm.
life. And yet here's this disruption, and I could really see mentally and the differences that the trauma, how it affected me. It would interfere when I had court hearings coming up. I wouldn't be able to concentrate. I could see, I could observe those symptoms that I wrote about in my paper as I was going through these different experiences. So throughout my college experience, getting my bachelor's degree in psychology, I was also going to court, testifying in hearings. And so I'm going to take a breath and tell you a little bit more about that in a minute.
Sure.
But if you had any like summary or questions or anything that you wanted to pause there, I can talk.
Beautiful. Whenever you're ready.
So let me tell you a little bit about the court hearings and the
Ah.
criminal trials and the process.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when after the first hearing, they took the week or so, the police started coming around and asking me questions about the facts of the case. Um, so this was October 5th. It happened to me. And they would take me into the station and show me different binders and folders of spreads of photos. Sometimes they'd come with a handful of photos and put them up on the table. Is any one of these people? They never showed me one picture at a time on purpose, any of these people. And I remember identifying one person ahead of time, and then later they came back to me and they held up the blue denim bag and they said, "Is this the blue denim bag that was left that was used in your crime?" And it looked exactly like the bag that the person had brought to the counter, the one that had the gun. And I said yes. And so it turns out that that blue denim bag was left at the scene of a Holiday Inn armed robbery that resulted in the murder of an off-duty
Oh,
police officer in Hammond, Indiana.
wow.
6 weeks after what happened to me, one of the police officers at the department was killed working security. Okay, so now the detectives in the Hammond Police Department are really, really interested in all the crimes that had a blue denim bag involved, and mine did. So they brought me in and they talked to me some more. And then one of them said, "Well, we have this, technique to help you relax and pay attention." And they hypnotized me, two of the detectives. My dad came with me to make sure that I was going to be safe. And the detectives hypnotized me to help me remember the license plate number of the car and identify the people who assaulted me, because I'd only identified one of the assailants in the pictures. So when the one detective hypnotized me and sat in front of me, and my dad was sitting off to the side, but I knew he was there. And so one of them was listening and taking notes while the other one was doing the talking. And they told me in my mind, to imagine a room with a really comfortable chair. And I went down in an elevator and they told me, "How far down in the elevator are you?" And I gave them a number, and I think it was 32. And they said, "When the elevator door opens, there's going to be a very comfortable chair. Go sit in the comfortable chair." And then they said, "Watch like you're watching on a movie screen. You can control this memory," and helped me remember the license plate number. They wrote down that I
Wow.
remembered
Yeah.
while I was hypnotized. And then they helped me remember the face of the second man who had assaulted me. Because when he was in the gas station, he kept his parka over his head. And when he was driving the car, he was in the front seat and I was in the back seat. So I never saw his face until he was right in front of me. And I really didn't want to remember that face. So during hypnosis, the detective said, "Remember the face and separate out the context." And it really helped me not be afraid to look at the face. And
Mm-hmm.
so when they brought me back out of hypnosis, they showed me another array of pictures, some of which they had shown me before. And I then identified the second person who was involved. The
Ah.
way I remember it, I remember his gold tooth. He had a gold tooth in the front. to the I guess it's called your incisor, I think. But anyway, I remembered his gold tooth. I could see his face. I could picture him, and I didn't feel terrified. So the hypnosis helped me to really do that, separating my emotional reaction to the memory from the image. So I could look at the image without being afraid. After that, I went to a lineup, and again, I was pretty nervous. And I walked in and I just went, "Ugh, that's the one." And I barely even looked. And it went, and they said, "No, no, wait, stop, take a breath. They can't see you. Look again, look at everybody there, and then tell us if you see him." And when I did, when I calmed down and I really focused, I identified him in the lineup. So I identified both lineups. I did both. I did the hypnosis. And from then on, the cops were pretty excited because I was a really good witness.
Oh, wow.
The person who had the gun was, who was accused, was a 17-year-old at the time. So I had to testify in juvenile court for him to be tried as an adult. This was his first conviction when he was convicted of the crime against me. So I first testified in juvenile court. Basically, the point of juvenile court is to demonstrate that the crime was an adult level crime, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? So he should be tried as an adult because what he did was an adult
Mm-hmm.
thing, right?
Absolutely.
So that he got tried as an adult. So then I had to testify a second time for him to be tried in the criminal court. And he was convicted and got 35 years in prison for his first conviction ever. The second one, the one with the gold tooth, was convicted and he was given 85 years in prison because he had 6 prior convictions. The older one was 32 years old at the time, and the younger one was 17. And it felt to me like the 32-year-old was training the 17-year-old on how to do this. He was kind of giving the commands, and the other one was the front man. I really had a sense of the young person. I was only 18 myself. I felt more like this is somebody who I would know. I
Mm.
could have known if our lives were, where the other one is this kind of distant image. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well,
So that's how they were. By 1983, they were both sentenced, and I got my bachelor's degree in 1984. So this was my college experience, classes and
uh,
criminal trials. This whole experience. This was my education. And interesting thing enough, my oldest sister Edie, who's really my mentor that I met in the other place, when I was a kid, she said, make sure when you're whatever you want to do for a living, make sure that you get personal experience, even if it's volunteer work, anything that you do that's going to be related to what you want to do when you graduate will give you both an education and experience. So not only did I give this direct experience, but as I healed and recovered and practiced, I volunteered as a rape victim advocate. I went to court with other people. I helped people understand. I would sit with somebody in the hospital while they were getting the rape kit or help them understand what the rape kit was for. That becoming a rape victim advocate became the way that I worked on healing myself by helping other people.
wow.
So in addition to that, my mom had become a counselor while I was in high school, and she started a therapy group, as for survivors, and invited me to be her co-therapist, which was kind of weird. My dad was the person that was always at my side. He would sit with me when I had to go to court and testify, or he went with me when I was hypnotized. He was always there to make sure that I was safe and protected and emotionally cared for. So I had a lot of loving support, a really strong foundation for care. In addition to the cop being killed, there were 2 other crimes that were associated with these guys. A Kentucky Fried Chicken armed robbery
Mm-hmm.
and 2 hitchhikers that were picked up and sexually assaulted in the same car. And some of their evidence was left in the car that was found after I got the right license plate number. So that's pretty much what happened.
Wow. Well,
Any questions? Or
I'm just so proud, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers are too, that, such an unfortunate event for you to start off, go through in your life, and then to have to deal with all this. But let me ask, if you could, would you go back and change any of it?
I really felt like this gave me an experience and an understanding of trauma that I never could have had
Yeah.
before. And because I had such a strong foundation in my family, a strong, loving foundation and solid attachment connections, loving support, people around me, I don't know of anybody who's had a better experience with being sexually assaulted and then going to court and having everybody rally around to make sure that they go to prison. It's pretty a unique experience. I wasn't blamed for anything that happened. I showed up and told the truth about what happened to me. And as far as I was concerned, the justice system worked really well because the people who hurt me weren't hurting anybody else anymore. I knew that these police officers were interested in getting these people to go to prison because of what happened to the cop. And I knew they told me we don't have enough evidence for them to go to prison for the Kentucky Fried Chicken or for the hitchhikers. Those people weren't able to identify them in lineups or in pictures, but I was able to identify them and testify. And so the police were so on my side, I thought, because the cop was killed and they wanted these people who hurt their buddy to go away. And I wanted these people who hurt me to stop hurting people. So I felt at that moment like justice was done. Even though I was now just a witness to a crime and I became kind of insignificant. And as we continue on with what else happens with this legal story, I think a restorative justice approach could have been different. If I look at that 17-year-old, I would have much rather had him have the opportunity to say, I really made a big mistake. He was driving the car when the cop was killed. He did not go in and kill the cop. And I really would have liked to see him given the opportunity to have a restorative solution to change his life into a different direction, similar to I did, but I have love and support for that. He didn't have that. There was nothing for that young man to give him the power that I had to use his experience to make the world a better place.
Wow.
I would love it if we could all do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I appreciate your honesty and your work and dedication to helping so many who've gone through similar situations. And clearly, with your work that you do every day, it continues to prove that you are a survivor, you're a fighter. And Lisa, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Again, if you are listening, we are here with Lisa Johnson. You can go to her website. It's lisajohnsonlmft.com. Is that correct?
Yes. Or the My Relationship with Oprah one, which is all about the book, and the podcasts and stuff will be there. And as the book comes out and gets published, you'll be able to get more information about it there.
Well, thank you so much.
That's the better place to find.
All right. Well, we shall. Thank you for everything today. Great speaking with you again. And hopefully, I'm sure we will have another great conversation soon. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Time.
You got it. Thank you so much, Lisa. Okay, enjoy the day. Bye.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.